Adam Coleman, founder of Wrong Speak Publishing and author of Black Victim to Black Victor. Adam, thank you so much for coming on the U.S. Report. Love having you here. First of all, we've got to talk more about Kamala Harris and this incredible hiding in the basement campaign she's running. The left continues to excuse her absence from the press and TV interviews as if it's no big deal. Have a listen here to former Bill Clinton aide Paul Begala when asked about this.
There's one question.
Sure.
Who cares? Come on, guys, get in the real world. I care. Acosta cares. We have press passes, okay?
Yeah.
So we care. It's a media issue. But there's nobody at the Tractor Supply shop who's saying, gee, I like that Kamala wants to raise the minimum wage. I like that she wants to cut the cost of my prescription drugs. I like that she's going to protect my sister's right to choose. But she hasn't done enough interviews with Acosta.
Adam, one huge problem with what Paul Begala is saying there is that we've actually never heard her say any of these things or defend them to the press because, well, all she's doing is putting stuff out. She doesn't even have policies on her website.
Yeah, he might have had a point if those were the circumstances, if she made it clear where she stands. She hasn't even made it clear that she stands in alignment with Joe Biden. So there's a lot of mystery as far as what she actually believes. And for regular people who aren't glued into politics, they really have no idea what she plans on doing. And part of the bigger problem, I think, with Kamala Harris throughout her political career is that she's a chameleon. She doesn't really have a whole lot of policy positions that she stands firm on. She just says the thing at the given moment that gets people to applaud her. I just watched her in front of an audience asking her if the first thing she'll do is abolish ICE detention centers. And she says, yes, on day one. And I'm just thinking to myself, would she say that if the woman, would she actually advocate for that? Of course not. She's only responding to what someone's saying in front of her. So I think she's playing a smart campaign because really no one knows what she believes, and it's probably better to have mysteries surrounding where you stand.
Yeah, but I mean, Adam, it's not a first date. This is a presidential campaign. We can't just keep a whole air of mystery around it. I thought, though, what you said there was absolutely correct because, like you, I'm not convinced that she's necessarily a doctrinaire hard leftist. I think she just goes wherever the wind is. And we saw this with her attempt to basically blatantly steal the Trump program of not taxing tips, despite the fact that she once signed legislation or helped pass legislation that would have taxed tips. I mean, what's your reaction to all of this hypocrisy?
Doesn't shock me whatsoever. And I agree with you.
Yeah.
We should have higher standards when it comes to people who want to seek power in this country, especially the seat of the president. But unfortunately, we have an example of 4 years ago where Joe Biden was allowed to hide in a basement and claim it's because of COVID. We've fostered this environment where dodging the press, not being firm on where you stand, and making it a referendum on Trump is the Democratic strategy. So much of this, we're kind of being groomed to accept that this is the type of behavior from a Democratic nominee.
I just find it, Adam, so odd that, they talk about our democracy all the time, this sacred thing, our democracy, and yet they seem to have this very sort of strange relationship with one of the guarantors of that democracy, which is the press. And, we saw this with this cover of Time magazine this week, which I was just reading, in which they wrote thousands of words in praise of how wonderful and bright the shining light of Kamala Harris thought was, and they didn't get one word of interview out of her. This seems to me like the press is really not doing its job. They're trying to get somebody elected rather than let people make the choice.
Yes, that's exactly it. The funniest thing about politics is the short-term memory that people have. They don't remember about, 5-10 minutes ago, polling showed she was one of the worst VPs in American history. 4 years ago, she didn't make it anywhere close to becoming the Democratic nominee. She's always been seen as a least favorable option when it comes to amongst Democrats. She was never a popular candidate The media wanted her to be somewhat of a popular candidate. They wanted to call her Mamala and all this other jazz. But the reality is that she was never seen as someone who is the next of anything until now, until about a week ago.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, of course, yes, she's the anointed one. So I think people are trying to convince themselves that they always thought this.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost sort of, Orwellian or North Korean with this. But you know what else is amusing? And I've got to talk about this with you because thankfully you wrote a piece about this that kind of connects it to America so we can have a chat about it. And that's the amazing Raygun breakdancing performance at the Olympics. Now, I know people have been speaking about it, but you've written a really interesting piece about the way American intellectuals and academics have kind of taken on the cause of Raygun. Tell us a bit more about this.
Yeah, so there's obviously people who are mocking her performance, and rightfully so. But I noticed that the people who are defending her were often they were leftists, and the other group were academics, and they just started making excuses as for why her performance was the way that it was, or just saying, well, at least she gave it a try, as if she's some kindergartner who's trying to play softball. This is the Olympics. It's not about just giving it a try. And I just started watching that, and I realized that, well, yeah, this is of the same bubble. These are the academic class. They always cover for each other. Even her PhD writings were basically a bunch of leftist dogma filled in with the typical words of decolonizing this and equity that. And that's the type of person that they're willing to cover for. But someone with eyes who actually watched it can just judge her based off of her performance, which was terrible.
Yeah, look, Adam, I think it's so fascinating that you wrote about this and said that the American intellectual, and let's just use this word advisedly, elite, was sticking up for this Australian woman over this, because this is exactly the way they behaved here in Australia. So thank you so much for highlighting that to everybody, that there's this kind of, I guess you would say, global intellectual class that sticks up for themselves, and they're totally transnational, and they pick up the same themes whatever country they're in. Am I right?
No, you're absolutely right. It's a mentality that is international. There's a level of elitism, but there's a level of protectionism amongst themselves. That's why I use the term bubble. These are the type of people who interact with each other. They theorize about the rest of the world, but don't actually interact with the rest of the world. They presume everyone's motivations, but they don't actually talk to the people about their motivations. So there's a lot of problems when it comes to the academics, especially now everybody can get a PhD in whatever studies that they choose to get it in, as long as you pay enough money. So the PhD standard doesn't mean a whole lot. And the criteria of being an academic is much smaller, but the bubble has actually grown.
Indeed. Adam B. Coleman, thank you so much for coming back on the U.S. Report. Love having your insights.